And here we are on 20 Tip Thursdays, this time showing you SOLIDWORKS Composer. So SOLIDWORKS Composer is a pretty large topic, and it'd be pretty easy to pick out 20 tips and tricks to show you, but I'm going to go ahead and break up my presentation into a couple of different sections here. We're going to primarily be looking at the general areas, the settings within Composer. We're going to show you a couple of tips and tricks on the images that you're going to be creating. We're going to look at the animation side of things and how to create those. And also, of course, different tips and tricks on the way we might want to output some of those animations and images. So the first section here is just on the general section, and there's a couple of housekeeping notes I really want to make sure that people understand when they're working in Composer, and that is the single body per part concept. Okay, that's very important. Hopefully, those of you who already have SOLIDWORKS Composer is utilizing that, because if you don't, there could be some problems with how custom properties come in and how your documents will be updated. We also want to look at the default document properties to capture any settings that we want to keep with our system, so we don't have to modify them every time we start up a new document. And finally, we'll also talk a little bit about the shattered file system and the benefits and also the disadvantages of the shattered file system. So let me go ahead and just jump over into Composer and take a look at what we have here. All right. So for my example, I'm going to be spending most of it with this Sea-Doo water scooter. So this is something that you get so you can play around in like your pool, or you know, if you're out in the water somewhere, it's just a fun recreational little scooter that you hold on to. It's pretty neat. But again, let's go back and talk about our single body per part concept. Okay, in your file properties area, there's a property called input. Okay, these are basically how you're importing your models into SOLIDWORKS Composer. And one of the options that by default is actually unchecked is merge file into one actor per part. Okay. Now, I do not know why that by default merge file into one actor per part is unchecked, because it is very critical that you have this option checked on, especially if you're importing SOLIDWORKS documents. It's sort of funny because one of the first questions or problems that I get from customers is that they complain that the updates don't work, or that they're unable to get custom property information into the bill of materials within SOLIDWORKS Composer. And 9 times out of 10, the reason that they're having those problems is because they don't have merge file into one actor per part. Now you might be asking yourself, well, E-Man, what's the difference between merging file into one actor per part versus not merging a file into one actor per part? If you don't have this checked on, when it imports the model in, it's going to import all the bodies of the parts into Composer, as opposed to bringing the parts. So what you're essentially going to get is in your assembly tree over here, instead of seeing the file name showing up next to the component, you're actually going to see the body name next to the component. And that's how you know that you don't have that checkbox turned on. And for those individuals, I unfortunately had to tell them, hey, you're going to have to start all over again. But when you import the document, you need to go to File, Properties, and again, make sure that when you're importing your documents, you have merge file into one actor per part activated. Critically important. So let's say that is something that you don't want to have to remember every single time. Like for instance, if I go over and choose to import a SOLIDWORKS document right now, I don't want to remember to always check this box on every time I come in here. So what you want to do is enter your File, Properties, Default Document Properties. You want to go to the Input section and check that on. By doing that, every time you input or start up a new session, it will automatically have that checkbox turned on. And that's actually a really nice tip for those of you who are constantly adjusting or modifying your document properties within your documents. Just make the change in your default document properties, and any new documents will adopt any changes that you make here. Okay. Another little note, when you're starting a project, a lot of times people will actually start off with the part itself. In other words, if I was going to start up a this jigsaw project, for instance, you'll notice that in it I have the jigsaw, and then it's actually, you can kind of think of it as a sub-assembly in a main assembly called root. That's actually how you want to start the assembly. You do not want the top level item to be the jigsaw, because in Composer you are creating a project file and you are bringing in SOLIDWORKS models into that project file. So a nice little tip or recommendation I can make when you're working with these documents is that when you're choosing to open up a document, like for instance, let me come over here and let me open up a Composer file. Okay. I've got this overturning mechanism. Oftentimes what I'll do is instead of opening up that Composer document, I'll choose to merge it into a new document. Okay? So when I hit open, right, you'll see that it says root right here, and underneath it, it says overturning mechanism. Okay? That's a little bit different compared to going to File, Open, and choosing this and just saying Open. Because if I did that, actually, let me close this down first. Try overturning mechanism. Open that up. And in this example, overturning mechanism is the top level item. Now, you might be saying to me at this point, well, E-Man, what's the difference of having the assembly at the topmost level or having it as a sub-item? Well, if you have it as a sub-item, you can add other assets to it without affecting the structure of the main assembly. Okay? So as an example, let me come over here, and again, I'm going to open up that overturn mechanism, and I want to merge it into a new document. Okay? And if I wanted to add other components, it would be just as easy. So I just go to File, Open, take a look at, maybe I'll bring this jigsaw into this project. And I'm going to say merge it into the current document. Right? So now what I have is I've got the overturn mechanism here as well as the jigsaw. Okay. All right. If I had the overturning mechanism as my base part and decided to bring in the jigsaw, then the jigsaw would actually be a subassembly item of the overturn mechanism, which I don't want to do. I want to manage these two SOLIDWORKS assembly files as separate documents. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about in this general section is the shattered file system. So when you come into SOLIDWORKS Composer and you decide that you want to save it out, by default, most people choose to come in and save as an SMG file. Okay? An SMG file will contain all the views, all the animations, all the geometry in a single monolithic file, a .smg file. In actuality, the SMG file is like a zipped document containing all those individual files. But you'll also have the advantage to come in here and choose to save it as an SMG XML file or an SMG PROJ file. If you decide to save it as one of these documents, the file is going to be in a shattered format. So let me go ahead and just save this out to my desktop. Okay? And what you're going to see here through the desktop is that each of those files have been saved out, or that file has been saved out into distinct files, or broken out into distinct files. Like this file only contains the geometric information of the Composer document. This file here only contains the animation. This file over here contains the information for the views. And this file over here is the kind of the container, or the main executable file. So what's the advantage of having these files shattered? The nice thing about this is that because you have distinct files controlling the geometry, the views, and the animations, you can just take the portions that you want and copy and paste them within different projects without having to open up the monolithic SMG file and resave all that information over and over and over again. It'd be much easier just to copy and paste this one document file into all the other project folders and make updates that way. So there are some advantages there. The one big disadvantage of this process is the fact that you have 4 or 5 or more files that you have to deal with in the shattered file system. So it's not nearly as elegant as using a monolithic file system. Okay. All right, so again, we went over single body per part and the benefits of that. We also talked about default document properties there. How you want to start your projects. When you're starting a project, you don't want to just open up the SMG file. You want to put it into a new document. And we also showed you how to create a shattered file system and the advantages of working with a shattered file system. Okay. Next thing I want to talk to you guys about is views. I mean, we spend most of our time working with creating images and working with views. So I want to talk about creating those views, working in an area called paper space, talk about the resolution of the digger, and also utilizing one of the workshops while working in images called styles, and of course outputting the different file types from here. So let me go ahead and jump back into Composer. Okay. Maybe we'll jump back over to the C scooter again. And hopefully a lot of you guys are already aware of what Composer can do in terms of its views. Essentially, we can move components around, add graphical assets, change colors and displays of items, and capture them in different views. So for instance, if I wanted to create a view that was more indicative of a manufacturing print, I'd probably want to go to a rendering state that looked more like a black and white drawing, you know? And maybe in the background here, I want to add something that looks like my title block. So I'm just going to come over here and choose to create a 2D image panel that will kind of represent my, my title block area. Stick that in here. And we want to make this look like the title block. So I just so happen to have a B-size drawing sheet JPEG here that I'm going to go ahead and use. And let's put that in here. Now you can see it looks pretty good. I've got my B-size sheet placed, but you know what? It's covering up my model. Well, one of the nice things about this 2D panel that you see over here is that you can actually set it to the background if you'd like. And we can also tell it, hey, I don't want it to be selectable. In other words, I can't accidentally move this or shift it around graphically because it's on my screen here. So now that I've done that, I'm just going to position my view just the way I like it. It looks a lot like a manufacturing drawing print at this point. If I really like it, I can go ahead and capture that as a view, right? And you're also probably aware that we can add things like bill of materials and even labels and annotations to my document over here. So for instance, maybe I'll go ahead and add a couple of annotations outlining what these things look like. Okay? And again, I'll go ahead and capture that as a view. So whether you're creating a view that's supposed to look like an engineering document, or you're trying to create something that's a little bit more photorealistic like I have here on my initial view, you can always capture that within your view area. But let me show you a couple of tips as well while working with the views. One of the first things you want to have established while working your views is your paper space. And the paper space in this case is being represented by this outside border here. Now this gray area here is still part of my main view area. You can still see the object here. But when I output this or print it, or if I decide that I'm going to create an animation from it, it's only going to take into account whatever's within my paper space area. Okay? So to establish that, that is a document property. So under properties here, I can go to document properties, and you can actually adjust the paper space. Okay? you're going to come in and choose one of the standard size formats that they have here, or you can choose custom and put your own in. Okay? So you want to put a paper space in here that makes sense to whatever sort of output that you're trying to create. If it's something for the web, it doesn't have to be as large or as high of a resolution, so you can keep your width and height pretty low. If you're creating something for print, you probably want something that is going to be at a larger size. Okay? So that is the paper space option. Now, even though I'm working with paper space here, you might not want to see this gray area over here. You can always deactivate that by hitting the button in the lower right-hand corner, and that will deactivate it for you. Now, when I'm doing certain operations with my model, like zooming in, zooming out, rotation, that's all very good and easy. But there are separate controls actually available that will allow you to pan your paper space if you'd like as well. Right? So be on the lookout for that when you're looking at your navigation tools. That's found on your preferences. So I'm going to go to File Preferences, and in here there is the navigation area. Okay? And so you can see if I hold down Shift, I can actually say I want to pan the paper, zoom the paper. In this area I'm just going to pick Pan Paper. So now when I hit Shift and my left mouse button, I'm actually panning the paper as opposed to panning the just the object. Okay, see? Some handy controls there for you to use. Okay. Now, for those of you who are already familiar with Composer, a fundamental component of Composer is the digger. I mean, this is a really cool thing. If you really need to create a detailed view on the fly, I can go ahead and just hit the space bar, and that will give me this detailed view magnifying glass over here. And you can take arrows and just drag them into the areas that you want. Pretty cool. Now, one of the small complaints that I get about this tool is that oftentimes you'll be trying to capture something on your image, and then you'll hit the Capture Detail button here, and you'll notice that it gets really, really fuzzy inside of the detail circle there. That is because the resolution that you're capturing there is controlled somewhere else. It's actually not even in the properties of the digger. Can you believe that? It's crazy. So this is actually another very typical question that I get from folks when they're first working with Composer is, hey, how do you control the resolution of what you're capturing in these detailed views over here? Well, it all relates back to your high resolution image workshop. If you go take a look at your workshop area and look in the high resolution image area, there's the ability to adjust what resolution you want to see within your document. So if this thing was really, really small, like let's make this 200 by 311, which is at 18 dpi, when I create my digger over here and capture, it's going to be really, really poor resolution. It looks horrible, right? But if you want nice, clean resolution available, let's like bump that up to like 300, right? Now if I come in and now create a detailed view, right? It's taking a little time to process because it's at a much higher resolution. You can see it's very, very pristine, very, very clean. So again, if you want to control the resolution within your digger, take a look at your high resolution image workshop area to help you work with that. Okay. Now, the next option that I want to show you guys, next tip, is about style. Something that I feel like is highly underutilized within Composer, but I feel like is essential in making quick and easy changes. Just like the high resolution image workshop over here, we also have other workshops, one of which is called the style workshop. Have you guys ever been in a situation where you need to make a wholesale change to a bunch of annotations and you don't want to go through every single one to make that change? Well, styles can really help you with that. When you open up the styles workshop, you can click on this new button to create a new style. This one I'm going to call E-Man's Awesome Annotations. Okay, right? So for the E-Man Awesome annotation, I'd really like it to look a little bit different than this ugly default annotation type that we have over here. So I'm going to click on rear nozzle, and we're going to choose to capture a style here. So for instance, for family, we're going to say this is an annotation type of style. This will help group our styles later on. And I really want to capture the text color. I do want it to be black. I do want to capture the font. In this case, it's MS Shell DLG, which I don't think anyone on the planet uses. So we'll go ahead and maybe put something else that I think is cooler, like let's put like Arial Narrow. I like Arial Narrow. I'm going to hit OK. Okay, so that's going to be the font that we're going to use. And the size of our font, I want to be like a little bit bigger, like 17. Okay. Now, what's a little bit uncomfortable about working with styles is as you're making the changes here, it's actually capturing that in the style. You don't have to hit the save button. It just does it for you automatically as you're making these changes. I also want the attachment, in this case, to be a leader type, but I want it to have kind of going to a point like so. And I don't want any shape. I don't want a rectangle around it. I want nothing around it. So I'm just checking on all the attributes of what I want to capture in the style. Okay? Once I've done this, I can look at my Styles tab, and look what I have here. It's called E-Man's Awesome Annotation Style, ready and available for me. So if I go over and I click on a couple of these existing annotations over here, I can paint them with my annotation style, and they'll all update with the properties that I defined within my style. Now, if you think that's cool, what I think is even cooler than that is the fact that they are subscribed to that style. Okay? What do I mean by that? Well, if I click on this annotation over here, you notice in my properties area, I don't have the ability to edit the text size, its font, its border. That's because it's all being controlled by the E-Man Awesome Annotation Style. Okay? It even says it at the very bottom down here. This is subscribed to E-Man's Awesome Annotation Style, and these are the things that are being controlled by it. So that means that if you have any annotations, or actually any object in Composer attached to a particular style, if I just go to that style in my workshop and make a modification to it, it will actually update any items that are prescribed to that particular style. Okay? So making wholesale changes across your documentation can be really, really quick and really, really easy. Okay? And it's not just for annotations, it's for any object within Composer. As an example, you can create a style that makes parts red, or maybe makes parts metallic. So it's not just limited to annotations, but the geometry and any other actors within Composer. All right, now eventually we got to take these views and we got to output them in the form of JPEGs or some sort of image file. I just want to briefly talk to you guys about the high resolution image workshop, and of course the different ways that we can output this image. And of course we have the ability to choose the resolution. That seems like it's pretty self-explanatory. But a question that I often get with outputting image files is, hey E-Man, there's bitmap, JPEG, TIFF, and PNG file. Like, what are the differences between these files and which one should I go with? Okay? And for those of you who are in the graphics field, you will already know this, but some of us in the engineering field, we think all these are the same. So just a little brief rundown of the different image types that you have here. You have the bitmap image type, which is probably going to be one of your largest image types here. It is an uncompressed raster image file, so it's going to be a perfect image file. It's going to be very, very large, and it's not very manageable. Now, the next one I would say that I want to talk about is a TIFF document. Now, TIFF is also not compressed, and it's going to be a larger file format. You see a lot more TIFFs when you're dealing with like high-quality photography and programs like Photoshop can easily edit TIFF documents. Maybe the most ubiquitous file that's out there is going to be JPEG. You're going to see that on a lot of web pages. You're going to see that used in a lot of other documentation. It's the most universal, I think, but just to keep this in mind, it does compress the image, meaning it will, when you're making the image file smaller, it's also going to degrade the quality a little bit, so your colors aren't going to come out perfectly. And for those of you who really care about good image quality, you might not want to use JPEG. Okay? Now, PNG is also very similar to JPEG. It does compress the image file, meaning that it makes it smaller and it does degrade the quality a little bit. But a great advantage of PNG files is that it allows for transparencies. So, as an example, if I went to the C scooter right here, output it as a PNG document, right? If I have this option on here called alpha channeling, okay, and notice it's not referring to a Greek fraternity. This is referring to transparencies ultimately. So if you check this on, what it's going to do is going to remove the background. So it's going to make that transparent so the only thing that you're outputting is the object that you have on screen. Okay? And the PNG file format will pick that up, whereas JPEG will just make this area white, and you have to like get rid of it later if you want. Okay? So keep that in mind. All right, so let me go ahead and jump back over to my lovely PowerPoint presentation. Okay? So we talked about views. We talked about the paper space that we're working in. I showed you how to adjust the digger resolution and how important styles can be for making large-scale changes across multiple documents. And I also showed you how to output different file types, and the advantages of those different file types that are out there. Okay. All right. So the next section I want to get into is animations, and of course I could probably have a 100-tip Thursday on just animations, but these are just a few key tips that I want to show you guys throughout when you're creating keyframe animations, when you're creating views, using your views to create animations, different filters that you might want to use while you're working with your animations, some neat little tricks on the toolbar that you want to do, and also we're going to talk about cleaning up your animations, because sometimes when you're working with views to create animation frames, it can be a little cumbersome. Okay? Let's go ahead and jump in. Okay. So we're going to bring up our awesome toolbar over here, and maybe you want to create an animation of this C scooter over here. So I do want to get my visual state figured out before I begin my animation. I'm going to go to my rendering tab over here, and you can choose, smooth outline, technical, flat technical. Now, a lot of people don't know what the difference is between smooth with outline and flat technical. I mean, they look, or sorry, not flat technical, technical. They look pretty identical to each other, in my opinion. See, I'm flipping back and forth between them. Can't tell. I mean, it looks exactly alike. Now, the real difference between these two formats is that with technical, you will get an outline on silhouetted edges. Now, you can't really see that here in this document, but let me just do this. I'm going to come in, and let's take my document here, and I'm going to make everything in it white. And you're going to be able to see it. I'm going to make it white, and I'm going to up the emission. Now, when I up the emission, what that's doing is it's making the parts its own light source. And if I put it all the way up, it will only show you the flat color of the part. Okay? So in this view right here, you don't see any silhouetted edges on our document. Okay? Now, if I go to my technical, the difference with it is that it is showing you the silhouetted edges. Okay? And that can be really helpful in your animations, because let's say you want to transition between a 2D black and white drawing and create an animation that transitions it into the three-dimensional model. One of the limitations with animations is that you can't actually switch back and forth between your different rendering modes, but you can actually trick it in Composer to do that for you. So right now, this does look like a 2D drawing, right? Because I put the emission all the way up, and I changed all the components to the white color. Well, let's go ahead, and I'm going to bring this over to the 2-second mark over here. I'm going to highlight all my components again, right? And I'm going to change it to the default colors. So we're going to come over here, and there's the button Restore Neutral Properties, and it's going to bring it up. I've got auto keys turned on over here. So in this keyframe animation I'm creating here, you can see that it's actually going to transition into a black and white document into a rendered document. Pretty cool. Then the next thing I might want to do here is maybe show an animation of these latches coming off. So we're going to zoom in over here. I want to select the assembly of this latch, and I want to rotate it out of the way. So we're going to use our handy rotation tool over here, and I'm just going to, rotate this around like 90 degrees. Cool. So now I've got an animation step over here that between 2 and 3 seconds where I've got this little latch being popped off. Pretty cool. Okay. And then within that same step, I'm not going to grab the assembly. Instead, I'm just going to grab just the one part here. Let me establish this initial location. Move this over here, like so, and let me zoom in so we can get a closer look at this. I want this thing to actually pivot out from this edge. Now I'm going to use my curve selection tool to do this. I'll rotate that out. Great. So now what you're going to see between the 2 and 3 second mark is that as the latch is coming out, this little part of the latch will actually rotate in the opposite direction. So it's going to do something like that. So it looks like it's disengaging from the part. Pretty neat, okay? So that is really helpful when creating animations, is to use the keys while you're creating the animations. But something I get asked a lot of times is like, E-Man, is there a way that you can use your views to help you create your animations? And the answer to that is, yeah, most certainly. Come over here to delete out the animation I currently have. And let's say you already created a view of the back side of this thing, and you already transformed and moved the back of this part out like so, and created another view. Okay? And maybe you want to rotate this around to the other side over here, and I capture that as a view. Well, you can use these as storyboard elements or storyboard views to create your animation. That's exactly what I'm going to do now. Maybe at the very, very beginning of my animation here, I want a nice little isometric view. So I'll drop that view down into my toolbar. And then a little bit later, after it stays put for a couple seconds, I want to come in and also transition into that view. Okay? Then a couple seconds later, I want the back panel to pop off. And then a little bit later after that, I want to rotate it to the other side. And then finally, well, actually I'm not going to do the final step here, but you can see that the tool will actually fill in all the steps of the animation in between. Okay, so notice it rotated it around, drop the back off, it's going to rotate it back like so. So you can definitely use keyframes to help you create, or sorry, the views as keyframes to help you create your animations. All right. Now, a couple of tips here. I just created an animation showing how this item comes off and I rotated it around. If I wanted to show an animation of it going back and rotating around the other direction, I can actually take the steps I just created here, just highlight them in my tree, and we're going to make a copy of it. I'm just going to hold down Control, grab the black bar here, and drag it out, and that's going to create a copy of those same keys here in my timeline. Now, I don't want it to go through the whole process again like we're seeing here. I want it to go in the reverse order. So if I just right-click on this black bar, I can choose to invert time selection, and that will give me the animation for the reassembly. So at this point, if I hit play, you can see it's going to turn around the other direction, bring the part back in, and then go back out. Okay. Now, one little note about using views to create your keyframe animations. When you take a view and you drag it down into this timeline over here, it is actually going to capture keys for all the actors that are in that view. All the actors. So if you had 1,000 components in your assembly and you drop the view down into your timeline over here, it would capture keys for all 1,000 components. Okay? Every time you drag one down, there'd be another 1,000 components that are going to be in this key. That is going to make your animation very, very inefficient. And actually, even with this simple assembly over here, when I hit play, even though only this black item is moving, this black cover plate, it's a little stuttery as it goes through to create the animation. That's because it's capturing movement for all the components, not just for the black item that's moving. So something I really like to do is to clean up the animations after I use my view tools here by getting rid of any redundant keys. You go to your Animate tab over here, there is an option called Delete Unused Keys. Okay? So if you click on this, it's asking me, do I want to delete all unused keys? Are you sure you want to do this? Because it can't be undone once you've done it. And I'm going to hit OK. And it's going to go ahead and get rid of any keys that are redundant or not being used. And my animation is actually going to be a little bit smoother, a little bit more efficient because of it. The file size of it's going to be smaller, and it should play back even better. Okay? So those are a couple little tricks associated with animations. Okay. The last thing I want to talk to you guys about is outputting your images from Composer. You've got different ways to get the assets from Composer into other documents that you're going to be using, whether that is a printed document, so you might need to embed it into Word, or if you're going to be inputting it into a PowerPoint presentation later. There's some different ways that you can go about doing it. So let's discuss that. Okay. Now, let me go back to Composer here, and I've got these different views that I've created, and maybe I want to save all of them out as images that I'm going to be using in a printed publication later. Well, I'm going to go to my high-resolution image workshop again, and there's a tab here called Multiple, and I choose to save out all the views. It's going to be named file name underscore view name. Okay? And let's go ahead and save those out. I'm going to use a new hit PNG document, and I'm going to create a new folder here called Scooter Output. Okay? Now in the Scooter Output, I'm just going to hit Save, and you can see a little progress bar over here, and it's going to be outputting all of those images that I just created at the resolution that I set. And I think this is a pretty high resolution. I think I put it at 300 dpi the last time I checked. So now if I look into my Windows Explorer over here and take a look at my desktop, you can see on the Scooter Output that I've got those image files already created for myself. Great. Now they're ready to go to put into a Word document or an Excel spreadsheet or a PowerPoint presentation, or if you're using InDesign or any of those other publication tools, it's ready and available to use. Let me go ahead and just open up Microsoft Word, because I think most people are familiar with the tool. You use it a lot. And so you might be using this document to show a disassembly procedure. Yeah, why not? Grab that. Put that in the middle here. And I'm going to put an image into this document. Now this has nothing to do with Composer, but just as a recommendation for a workflow, when you're bringing in images from Composer, is to do this. come in and when you bring in your picture, let's go to desktop. Let's go to Scooter output here, and I'm going to bring in this first image here. I'm going to insert that into my document. Okay, and actually I did it incorrectly. You don't want to do it that way. So instead, when you bring in a document, go to Picture, find the image that you want, and instead of choosing Insert, not a lot of people actually pull this down. There's an option here called Insert and Link. Okay, what this will do when you hit Insert and Link is it'll put the image in here, but it'll link it back to the original JPEG that we have in that folder. Okay, let me go ahead again, and I'm going to put the second step in here. Let me insert another image. Okay, picture. And this one I'm going to show the back piece being pulled off. And again, I messed up. It's so easy to not insert the image properly. Insert picture. Bring that in. And we're going to insert and link. Okay. All right, awesome. So I've got these two images in here now. And again, this has nothing to do with Composer, just the way that I want to work my images into my, my document. Now that I have these two images here and they're linked back to that location, the really cool thing about this is that I can tie that into my Composer workflow. Okay? So let's go back over to Composer, and while we're working on these images, you might say to yourself, hey, you know what, I really don't like how one of these particular views look. Like this view, view 5, the one we put in our Word document, I need to let people know that they have to unscrew some screws on this document before they do that. So maybe I'll go ahead and add some things from my image library over here. I want to show that you need to unscrew some things. So I'll put in a little symbol that shows that, and I'm going to update this view over here. Yeah, right. And then on this view over here, you know what? Let's jazz this up a little bit. Maybe I also want to show a cool arrow indicating you know, how this thing is supposed to come out from this object. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Something like that. Okay. And maybe I want that to also be captured in my view. Actually, that doesn't look too great, does it? Let me make that into a gradient. Don't stay on top. And I want the opacity to be really big. Sorry, folks, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I really want this arrow to look good, even though I probably won't see this example again for a long time. Okay. That looks better. Now I'm going to go ahead and update that view now, showing the arrow coming off these. So now what happens is if I later on choose to use my high-resolution image workshop to, again, output these image files back into my Scooter output document, it's going to override those files. Okay, so give it a second. So the next time I look at that Word document that we're working at earlier, I can just choose to tell it, hey, update any of the external links that we had for these image documents, and it'll go ahead and do that for us. Well, actually, you know what? I didn't save them as PNG files. I saved them as JPEG files. So kind of messed up there. So let me go back into Composer and do that again. So if I look and choose to save as, I have like two sets of files in here. I've got JPEGs and PNGs. So I never actually ended up overwriting those documents. So I'm going to do that again. This time in the proper file format. Okay, it's outputting the image files. And PNGs are going to take a little bit longer because it has to calculate the transparency area it's putting in. Now let's go back to my Word document, and I'm going to update these items, and you're going to see they're going to update with the changes that we made within Composer. Okay. So that's one way you can output Composer information into your Word documents. Of course, you can also create videos and embed those into your PowerPoint or whatever documents that you want. But the last type of output I'm going to show you guys is the ability to actually embed the Composer model within any Microsoft Office product, be that PowerPoint, Word, Excel. Okay? In this example here, I'm going to come into my Developer tab. Now, Microsoft doesn't trust you with the Developer tab, so you might have to go to File, Options, and actually turn on the Developer tab. Okay? Once you do that, you can come in and create a ActiveX control box for the 3D via Composer components. Okay? You're going to see it in this long list here. You're just going to pull that one out and then create a box that represents your Composer information, and you can actually embed the full Composer document into that window. Okay? So I think that's all the time that I have for today, but I just wanted to review again that we went over some general settings while working with Composer. I showed you a few tips and tricks while working with your images in Composer. I also showed you how easy it is to create an animation and some subtle hints on things that you can do to make your animation stand out a bit more. And finally, I showed you a couple different ways to output images and also the full Composer document within any Microsoft program. Okay? So before I finish up over here, does anyone have any questions they would like to ask in regards to the Composer product, or any tips and tricks that, any other tips and tricks that I might have? Okay, one question I'm getting here is, can I import custom text into styles? I think what they're meaning by that, importing custom text to styles, is there a way to just put in labels, like predefined labels, into the document? And that's a great question, actually. No one's ever asked that before. But oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm getting a clarification. So they're asking about custom styles, meaning like different symbols and so forth into the document. As long as it's supported as a font style, then it will be able to come into the text. So if you have weird brackets or plus marks or Greek symbols, as long as there's a viable Windows font for it, you can bring that in. Okay. Okay. Another question I'm asking that I'm getting asked is, can I import or use the SOLIDWORKS explode animation in Composer? Not necessarily the animation, but the exploded view that you create within SOLIDWORKS will show up in Composer, and then you can use that view technique to drag the views down into the toolbar to create that animation. So you just drag the view with the items exploded, and then you drag a view with everything put together, and it'll create all the steps in between for you. Okay, another excellent question. Okay, and another great question here. When disabling the gray area in the paper space, how do I know when my model is outside of the printable area? Well, you don't at that point. You do need to show that gray box. Okay, for those of you who are just wondering what is being talked about here, if I turn off the paper space button over here, right? How do I know if I move this over here like this that it's going to print everything? You really don't. You really don't know. That's why you need to, before you output, it is a good idea to check your paper space outline to make sure that your entire model is within the printable area. Okay, so great questions. looks like somebody tried to ask a question, but it didn't necessarily come through. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions for today, feel free to drop me a line. My email is right there, ekim@trimec.com. You can also call the TriMec support line at 188-TriMec if you have any questions in regards to Composer or any of the programs that TriMec supports. Again, it was a pleasure to do this webinar and be out here next week for the next 20 Tip Thursday.